Magic here, folks, and we're going to watch Eric Froehlich playing Selesnya counters against Camilo Mora playing Gruul Adventures. And we'll see if this Selesnya counters deck with Temple of Plenty to kick things off, and of course the Conclave Mentor in hand, if this can be the aggro weapon of choice in this format. Both these players, Patrick, 1-0.
And, that could be a thing that you're looking into here to attack the ramp deck. They've looked vulnerable to size on the battlefield. And so Selesnya tokens, or Selesnya counters rather, also make sense if you think that they're just kind of vulnerable to making big things and beating you down before the shop gets set up.
Luminar Gasprint was Ephro's first play. That comes down. Go to combat, put a +1/+1 counter on that thing. But Stomp via the Bone Crusher Giant took care of that. A couple copies of Edgewall Innkeeper coming in the red zone there for Camilo, and so Ephro's going to fall down to 15. You see that hand there? It's got plenty of goodies in it, but the big question is how do we get a sequence? So we're going to go to the Mentor. We're going to play one of these modal double face cards and just pass the turn back. So we'll see if the Mentor can actually stay on the battlefield, because we know, much like with Hardened Scales and Winding Constrictor, that if those things do stay on the battlefield for long, you're going to outclass all the creatures on Mora's side.
Good news there for Eric. No more adventuring there that turn from Camilo. A deck like Selesnya counters is going to be really vulnerable to the Innkeeper because they don't have a whole lot of creature removal. And if that card is allowed to stay online, then Gruul Adventure is very likely to overpower you.
Eric with another Conclave Mentor into a Stonecoil Serpent. That'll be a 4/4. So now things are starting to get a little out of control. You see the Great Henge in the holster costing 5 mana right now. So Ephro's just looking to keep these Conclave Mentors on the battlefield. Speaking of a deck that doesn't have a lot of removal, you can say the same thing for Gruul Adventures. It really does rely on this Stomp half of Bone Crusher Giant. Here is a Questing Beast looking to give some beatdowns here. So it looks like Bone Crusher and QB are going to come in. Stonecoil Serpent's going to trade there. Makes a lot of sense. And then we could have a pretty crazy turn here for Eric, potentially. It looks like Oran Reef Ooze in hand, among other cards.
Yeah, and if you can get to the Great Henge in a creature mirror match, that's going to cinch it up more often than not. The cards, the life, your position becomes very hard to assail. So from Eric's perspective, just kind of want to hang back, block, keep your life total high, and rely on that to eventually mop things up.
Looks like those Conclave Mentors are going to come into the red zone. Oran Reef Ooze, 3 mana 2/2, enters the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. When Oran Reef Ooze attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. So in combination with Conclave Mentor or Mentors, plural, that thing can get out of control. But right now, that Ooze is the biggest creature on the battlefield. Rimrock Knight going to come on down. 3/1 that can't block, but it can trigger Edgewall Innkeepers, plural. So there's the 3/1. Draw a couple of cards here, Will Mora.
But unfortunately, from the Gruul Adventure side, we're kind of in this no good attacks, no good blocks sort of setup. And Eric's advantage becomes overwhelming if he's just sort of allowed to set up shop here.
Yeah, and Eric has a lot of really, really, really good draw steps, too. So looks like we're going to see Bone Crusher come in here against the Ooze. Ephro's going to snap block, and so it's on Mora to have something here. In Eric's hand right now, for what it's worth, is Kalani Kalani Takedown. So that one is a removal spell from white, a new one. And for those of you unfamiliar, and seeing it being placed in this deck, Bone Crusher Giant's trigger is taking place right now too, which you all can see, and I think we're all used to that one. But Kabira Takedown, is 1 and a white, deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control, a target creature or planeswalker. So Skyclave Apparition, the draw now.
Yeah, Eric said the attack there from Camilo kind of gave off a whiff of Rimrock Knight. I think Eric was hoping to get everything there with that block, but removal spell still plays. Eric keeps sizing up his threats, and now has the opportunity to deploy the Great Henge as well.
Yeah, the Great Henge on the cheap into the Skyclave Apparition, so this is a heck of a turn, because don't forget the Great Henge gives counters, so now Skyclave Apparition can take care of that, and now the Apparition will get a little bit bigger because of the Conclave Mentor, Great Henge, the Swarm Shambler gets a little bit bigger because Great Henge gives counters, Conclave Mentor on the battlefield. So all of a sudden, Ifro had just an Oran Reef Ooze and the Conclave Mentor. Now he's got additional 4/4, which is a removal spell, a Great Henge on the battlefield, a Swarm Shambler, which is a 4/4, and an Oran Reef Ooze in hand. So you can see just how powerful the Great Henge is in this strategy, Patrick.
And it's important, specifically for Eric in this game, to have some source of card advantage and presence on the battlefield that is able to overwhelm the innkeepers. Because it looked like Camilla was the one who was better set up to just sort of hang back, trade, and eventually overwhelm the game. But Eric's ability to size up his creatures to make the battlefield unmanageable for Gruul Adventures, and then eventually pivot with the Great Henge and develop this overwhelming advantage. A really nice script here for Eric and what looks to be a walk-away Game 1 win.
Yeah, this one looks like it's going to be pretty easy now. I mean, he's going absolutely nuts with Conclave Mentors, Oran Reef Oozes, looks like a Stonecoil Serpent. Great Henge is going to trigger 7/7 there. And as many cards as Camillo may have in hand, as Oran Reef Ooze is going, oh man, we're going full-blown crazies here. As many cards as Mora may have in hand. Outclassing the battlefield in a very big way. It's a 10/10 Ooze, an 8/8 Mentor, a 7/7 Apparition, and a 7/7 Swarm Shambler coming on in. And Ifra also sitting at a very comfortable 15 life.
Make sure to think about these blocks. This is your chance to catch up.
That's right.
Go through the motions here, but not a whole lot for Camillo to do here in terms of actually making inroads on the battlefield or threatening a lethal crackback. So we're just sort of doing some accounting right here.
Yes. So you see the battlefield here for Froehlich, you see the battlefield here for Mora, and though Mora, again, does have more cards in hand, which means likely more options, I don't think that this Gruul Adventures deck has any of the necessary tools to get out of this situation. They do not, and they will concede the game. So Ifro up a game right now with Selesnya counters, and we've talked about aggressive strategies in this format a little bit, Patrick, as far as options are concerned. Maybe this is the best one. I know that we saw Mono Green Aggro get the job done earlier on in this round, but this Selesnya deck, it certainly looked impressive in that last game.
I do like the approach of Mono Green Aggro and Selesnya counters to say size on the battlefield. I think that's your best hope of being able to hang with the ramp deck when they actually get to do their thing. Like if you're playing a deck like Mono Red, you're sort of saying, I can kill Lotus Cobra, and hopefully I can manage the game if Omnath shows up. And we've watched players be able to actually beat the ramp deck head-to-head when they produce enough size and tokens on the battlefield. So some really nice early returns here for green aggro and green-white aggro as well. I know Ifro's not in a squaring off against a ramp deck here, but you can see what the plan of the deck is. They really only have Bone Crusher Giant to manage early, and Eric saw a Bone Crusher Giant there early on, backed up by a couple of Innkeepers, but was still able to overwhelm Gruul Adventures eventually.
Well, take a look at that opening hand here. We got a Pathway of the green-white variety. A couple of different modal double face cards here, modal DFCs as we like to call them. So looks like this hand is keepable. I always enjoy that, like on first glance, you're not sure, so you got to check your cards as we, as a community, get more familiar with what's going on with these brand new Pathway lands and modal double face cards. But here we are as we're underway here in game number 2.
Yeah, I like the moment of, is this hand a mulligan or is it a perfect curve? I need a second to assess.
Yeah. Yes. Give me just one moment as Lovestruck Beast number 2 will be going on an adventure. There's a Pathway. Here's a Conclave Mentor. Best card in the deck. It facilitates everything if it does stay on the battlefield, so it'd be important for Camilla to have a stomp. It's an Edgewall Innkeeper to kick it off. Is there a stomp in the holster? There is. Very timely. So a little bit of life will be gained up to 21. Back down to 19 as we head back over to Ifro.
Yeah, perfect turn there. And a lot of leftovers to work with as well. Cards in hand. An Innkeeper that's probably not going anywhere. Very good opening here for Camillo.
Here's a Glass Casket. Looks like it's time to say goodbye, Edgewall Innkeeper. Don't want you to be around to get a bunch of card advantage, so that problem is taken care of. So we will keep moseying on along here. There's a Lovestruck Beast. That's a land. Here comes an attack for 2. Not too much going on there. Looks like Plains is going to be the play, and now it's the Skyclave Apparition. This one's a new one there from Zendikar Rising, but it's a card that a lot of people really do like in white. Pretty powerful is that 3-mana spell. It is a 3-mana 2/2 Core Spirit. Enters the battlefield, exile up to one target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control with converted mana cost 4 or less. When Skyclave Apparition leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner creates an X blue illusion creature token, where X is the converted mana cost of the exiled card. So, you saw that take care of a Lovestruck Beast. Speaking of Lovestruck Beast, it's coming in the red zone now. We'll see if Ephro wants to do any blocking against the powerful 5/5. But looks like Eric is starting to dig his feet in a little bit here, Patrick.
Yeah, settling in, blocking a little bit. Doesn't appear to have a big card to play to, but is at least managing the battlefield. And yeah, that apparition, as you mentioned, kind of in that baffling end school of Fiend Hunter / Oblivion Ring, where the thing that you get if you destroy it is unrelated to, or not unrelated, but isn't just your initial card back. You just get paid out in a different thing.
I think we lost you a little bit there, partner, but we will continue on in this game. Here's an Oran Reef Ooze, going to put a counter on that token. You do see the Kabira takedown in hand right now for Eric, but not doing a great job of taking care of the problematic 6/6 in Elder Gargaroth. So here's a Thundering Rebuke pre-combat, going to look to take care of that Oran Reef Ooze. Looks like this removal spell is going to work. And so now are we going to see that 6/6 Elder Gargaroth come on into the red zone? We will find out here momentarily, as there is a pathway. And we'll see if the big 6/6 actually feels comfortable attacking or not.
Seems like it's a pretty good spot here. All the outcomes are various shades of good, even if Eric has a removal spell. I think it's just an issue of how you want to manage the battlefield prior to getting into combat.
Well, here is another Thundering Rebuke, so it's going to make it even more attractive right now for that Elder Gargaroth to attack. You'll get the Skyclave Apparition trigger, 3/3 now, Blue Illusion on the other side of the battlefield, and here comes the big 6/6 with Vigilance, moseying on in. Going to draw Camillo a card, will the Elder Gargaroth. And, you know, this card from Quartet 2021, it is a very, very powerful card, pretty fair in my estimation, but when it is on a battlefield like this, it can feel pretty unfair to the opponent. So we're going to see a Swarm Shambler put a counter on it, as Elder Gargaroth is looking to run away with this game. And as good as Skyclave Apparition is, it is not a solution to the big 6/6 beast.
Well, we had a lot of game leading up to the moment where Elder Gargaroth took over. So hard to complain about it being too much when it's like, well, we played 7 turns. Something's got to win the game.
Yes, this is true. No argument there, that's for sure. Gargaroth going to come across into the red zone along with the rest of these knuckleheads. So looks like we're going to see a double block here on the Gargaroth. Hopefully things are going to go right here for Froehlich if you're rooting for him. So there is a double block with 3/3 and a 2/2. And now Swarm Shambler is going to go to +1/+1 counter on it. So it's going to become a 3/3 as well. Bone Crusher Giant's Stomp is going to cause Eric to immediately concede the game. So if you wanted a third one between Selesnya Encounters and Gruul Adventures, you got it. It's coming. And Ephro and Selesnya Encounters will be on the play for game number 3.
It's not the most natural play pattern for Gruul Adventures, but I think it is well served in this matchup to be in a sort of like the aggro deck. I think the long game is pretty substantially favored for Eric, not deterministically. He's not playing with like Sphinx's Revelation and sweepers or whatever, but we saw in game number 1 where when things settle down, he's able to go big and also play with the Great Henge. I think Camillo's advantage in the matchup is getting onto the battlefield early, breaking up Froehlich's synergistic pieces, and then winning with 4/3s and 6/6s. Because Eric doesn't actually play that well card for card. His deck is sort of set up in this matchup to get an advantage by getting multiple cards in play that are greater than the sum of their parts. And if Camillo can break up the synergistic pieces, Eric's left with 2-mana 2/2s, and Camillo can handle that stuff pretty easily.
Well, here comes game number 3. Couple Pathways, Temple of Plenty, a Plains. Got a Giant Killer card I think is actually rather good in this format. Both sides of that card are quite good. A Stonecoil Serpent, and then a Skyclave Aberration. So good enough. Doesn't have Conclave Mentor and some of the counters aspects of the deck, but this is the other half of Selesnya Encounters, right? Where you're not always going to have Conclave Mentor. You're not always going to have Hardened Scales in your Hardened Scales deck, so your deck has to be able to work without it, and we're going to see if Eric's deck can do that as he's looking at a Basri's Lieutenant off of the Scry that he's happy to keep on top.
And Giant Killer, one of the best answers in the format to Elder Gargaroth. actually really on both sides. Obviously, as a removal spell, and a tapper is not that bad. Again, it's not like Camilla has all the removal in the world to interact with it, even if it's cumbersome to use that way.
Plains the draw here for Froehlich. He'll deploy that. Coming on in with his 2/2. Easy enough. And just going to pass the turn back. So, see what Mora has on the third turn. Could be as simple as attacking and playing a Lovestruck Beast. That turn would make a lot of sense, and that'll be the turn. So 5/5 on the battlefield. And Giant Killer's Adventure App's going to take care of that. So see you later, Alligator. We're heading back over to Ephro now. Flooding a touch, as here is Bazzi's Lieutenant. Trigger. Going to put some counters various places. 4/5, and with a 2/2. You see Ephro's got a couple pathways in hand. That Skyclave Apparition is going to have to be working.
And this is actually the
Giant Killer, as mentioned, out on an adventure.
Yeah, the Giant Killer here might be really, really nice in terms of managing Elder Gargaroth, which is a card that otherwise Eric's pretty vulnerable to, and otherwise he's just adding to his presence on the battlefield, pulling ahead here on his presence, and I think Eric's in a really good spot here to get game number 3.
Well, there's a pathway. Conclave Mentor and Giant Killer pass the turn back. You mentioned managing Elder Gargaroth, and Giant Killer does a great job of that, and there is the Gargaroth, so it's kind of like how we drew it up. So, that big 6/6 is here. There is the land. No good attack, so now you have to play this turn a little bit of on a delay, which means that you pass the turn. You have Giant Killer ready to tap down the Gargaroth, and then you do your attack in the following turn. So your hope right now, if you're Froehlich, is there's not another gigantic creature like a second Elder Gargaroth that's going to show up afterward, because if that's the case, it's going to be a very hard game to win.
Yeah, I mean, he can handle a lot of stuff here. The Apparition can potentially handle a follow-up. You've got a tapper for an Elder Gargaroth. But as you mentioned, one more big expensive play, say a second copy of Elder Gargaroth, puts Eric in a really vulnerable position. So he's just got to keep his fingers crossed.
Well, speak of the devil, and it shall appear. It's a second copy of Elder Gargaroth, and now Ephro's in some serious trouble, and he's got to find a way to find an answer to this nonsense, because Gargaroth, as we saw in the last game, and we've seen a little bit during its lifespan, can win a game all by itself. So now would be a great time to draw another copy of Giant Killer, and with the first Primal Might taking care of the first Giant Killer, you got to draw something now. Glass Casket is not the answer that we are looking for there, P. Sully.
And that's sort of a replay that we saw of game number 2, where Froehlich lost to a 5-mana creature with Glass Casket and Apparition as part of the equation. He does have answers for Gargaroth, as we saw, Giant Killer specifically, but his deck is more set up for handling cheap permanents post board, and just these big 5-mana creatures are problematic.
Yeah, this is a very, very real issue. Elder Gargaroth is a card that comes in a lot of different places, and this is definitely a home for it. And as I mentioned, we saw in the last game where it was able to run rampant, and now you're going to see that try to unfold once again. So they're both coming in there. What has Camillo got to lose? That's what they're thinking. So in we go. I'm going to make a 3/3 with one, draw a card with another, and yeah, you're going to have to tender some blocks if you want to get this thing off the battlefield. So here's a hope and a prayer with a double block here from Ephro.
I think that's the first time I've seen Oh, my goodness.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. That ain't it.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine.